So it's like it is nice to know your experiences here. Thank you.
В Индонезии они пытаются сделать другой дифференцированный подход, где можно для малых предприятий один подход, для больших проектов другой подход, чтобы они могли сразу пойти. So Kyrgyzstan has the same size fits all type of complaints handling. Whether you are SME or a large project, it's the same procedure. Yeah.
This came in virtually, Galia. One is a comment for Chris, and the comment is, most of the complaints on bidder eligibility and qualification in procurement are open, but it will not be minimized. So the second, which is a question for Chris, is what happens if the supplier is unsatisfied with the decision reached?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, that depends on the actual legislation. So the procurement legislation will set out the process for appeals, and therefore there's an opportunity to escalate the matter if the original investigation has not been satisfactory as far as the supplier is concerned. It's not something I think I actually looked at closely in terms of how the digital systems would differentiate between a complaint and an appeal. But I think that the general principle is the legislation will set that out in terms of what suppliers can do. I'm not sure in the case of Kyrgyzstan, maybe whether there's any data, Asulu, on the difference between the submission of a complaint and how many go to an appeal. Do you have that information?
У вас есть информация между апелляцией и жалобой? Разница между апелляцией и жалобой? Okay, appeal is practically a second type of procedure when you can appeal on your complaint handling. So obviously there will be less appeals than there are complaints. Okay, I think we call it a day for procurement complaints handling. There is one more question. Oh, and there is more question there. Grab the microphone, please.
I am Malda from Maldives, and my question is for Aisulu. In your presentation, you have mentioned that regarding a procurement complaint, the procedure shall be suspended for 5 days. But for the recent decision, the complaint handling, they get 7 days. So I wanted to confirm whether the project can be awarded prior to answering any complaints.
В вашей презентации вы говорили, что процесс останавливается на 5 дней, а время рассмотрения жалоб 7 дней. So the complaints are considered within 3 days. So the process is suspended for 5, and the complaints need to be considered in 3. Okay, but excellent question. You draw some attention to these minor details, or maybe major details.
Thank you. This is, I think, a follow-up question regarding penalty. I'm curious to know what is the best practice of applying penalty to the complainer or to the appeal. Yeah. Of course, there is a pro and cons, right? In the other side, if applying fine or penalty, it may discourage for the participation of public in monitoring or submitting complaint. But in other hand, it may also increase the number of complaints, which will increase the workload of the committee or procuring entity. So I just ask maybe Kyrgyz experience as well as Chris, if there is any study or on this best practice? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Can I jump in and start answering the question, although I'm not Chris or Aisulu? Okay, very long time ago when I was handling procurement in Vietnam, I was actually reviewing Vietnam procurement law. And interestingly enough, they already had a complaint handling procedure in Vietnam, which actually requested the complainant to with complaint actually to pay the money for complaint handling. However, the money is returned to the complainant if the complaint is justified. So in effect, you are trying to push away people who are wasting public time, but at the same time, if the complainant feels that the truth is on their side, they will still go ahead in submitting the complaint. But I will ask Айсулу, how is it, у вас берут какие-то сборы за то, чтобы подать жалобу?
У нас абсолютно все бесплатно.
So there are no fees.
Это не говорила презентация.
And she told about this in the presentation. There are no fees for lodging complaints, and there are no penalties that can be levied on the complainant. Chris, do you have any other suggestions about best practices?
Well, I would just point out actually that in cases, we've certainly seen cases in the UK where if the complaint is upheld, the supplier can receive significant financial compensation and damages, in some cases running to many millions of pounds. So the best practice, I think, is obviously that this has to be carefully investigated. But I think what is also incredibly important is that lessons are learned, so that if complaints are upheld, the origin of the complaint, the history of the complaint is carefully reviewed and fed back into how procurement is done in the future, not only to reduce the number of complaints and mistakes and delays, but also in terms of taxpayers' money. If these problems do escalate, they can cost the taxpayer a significant amount of money. So I just really wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Chris. And we have one more question, right?
Yes, I have one question to Chris Smith. Is artificial intelligence used in modern e-procurement systems? And if so, what automatic adjustments does it make to the systems? And what risks arise as a result of its use? Thank you.
Yes, excellent question. I have not myself seen cases where we're seeing artificial intelligence in terms of sophistication or sophisticated systems. What I think we're beginning to see already is that when the systems are data-centric, it is possible to develop algorithms that can analyze the data and produce red flags in terms of a pattern. So, for example, to be able to look at the data. So I don't think we're at the stage yet of artificial intelligence. And I have to say, many systems, EGP systems, are still so dependent on documents that artificial intelligence, I think, is some way off. But what we do have is the opportunity to have more data and the ability to use that data, for example, to identify patterns, trends, corruption risks, and also ways in which the procurement maybe can be improved in the future. We still have to rely on buyers with human intelligence to be able to make good procurement decisions.
Thank you, Chris. I think it's time. And okay.
One more.
One more question.
Just a quick question.
Last one.
For the complaints and penalties, it only covers for procurement process, or it can be also included, let's say, contract implementation, because contract implementation is different from the complaints from the procurement process. Is that
У вас
also
жалобы
cover?
только на закупки или на Управление контрактов тоже. Наша система новая. Короче, давайте я отвечу. So at this point of time, it only covers procurement. However, there are already discussions about going forward and looking at contract management.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And can you please give thanks to Aysulu and to Chris? Okay, so we are having a little bit of a break for next session. Okay.
Okay, hello. Good afternoon, all of you. So the last session was quite fantastic. So I saw a number of questions. So it was a very interactive session. So I hope the present session is also as interactive as the previous one. Okay, so session 4, I'll be moderating the session. My name is Ramanathan. Ram is a easier way out to pronounce it. And yeah, so the session is titled E-Procurement and Financial Management Integration. It also deals with contract management. Okay, so nowadays, earlier we were doing e-tendering primarily. Now we have the scope of implementation has extended to contract management and integration with the financial systems. Okay, so we have two fantastic speakers. There is one, Mr. Manoj Kumar. He will be speaking first. So he is, Mr. Manoj has a Bachelor of Technology in Electronics Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology. He is an officer from Indian Ordnance Factory Services, and he has 12 years of working experience in defense production. Currently, he is working in Government e-Marketplace as director, and his responsibilities include product marketplace management, services management, and forward auction management. So he will be presenting about the Government e-Marketplace system. I welcome Mr. Manoj Kumar, please.
Thank you, Ram. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank ADB for organizing this conference, bringing all of us at this forum for exchanging our ideas, for exchanging our experiences. I'm here to speak about the experience of Government e-Marketplace, GEM. It is basically a unified public procurement portal being maintained by the federal government of India. As we move through the slides, we will just navigate how the public procurement policies are formulated in India. How are we translating them to the e-procurement portal? And as the subject of today's broader discussion is about sustainable development, we will just look into how government e-marketplace is helping the sustainable development of India and up to the larger general scale to the entire world rather. May we move to the next slide? So this will be the broadly the contents that we'll be going through. First of all, we should know what we are talking about, the magnitude and scale of e-procurement in India, the need, why it exists, what is the broadness in terms of monetary terms or number of people it impacts, the degree of diversity involved, the variations in policies which are there, and other systemic hindrances what we have to navigate through. Then we'll move into the three primary products of government e-marketplace, wherein we deal with product, services, and auction. These are basically functions available to the government buyers in order to meet their procurement needs, and not only procurement needs, rather to dispose of the scraps as well. Then we'll be just looking through the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? What are their domain? What is their scope? How they utilize the portal? Some of their difficulties and how do we address them? Then we'll be navigating into the features which are available onto the portal. And as Ram has just mentioned that the exact subject of discussion is about the FMIS integration. We'll be talking in detail about integrations, not only in terms of financial management, but also for the incident management. Previous session we have discussed at length about complaints. We do have a complaint handling system in GEM, which we call as the incident management system. So that's an online mechanism of receiving and responding to the complaints. So we'll talk something about that. And finally, we will just look into what is basically the three pillars of sustainable development. Can we move? So basically, the first one, the administrative divisions of India. About India, I guess most of you would be aware, it's a very huge country, 3.2 million square kilometers of area, divided into 28 states, with all the states having different mandates, different policies, different guidelines, which naturally results into fragmentation of economies of scale. We do face challenges in terms of cross-border trade. So these kind of challenges are there. Then center state, both of them have got their own list onto which the ideas basically onto which they can make their own laws. Some of them are concurrent, some of them are residual. Then as we have seen that establishing a complete EGP system, it requires a lot of expertise. There are several states which are very small. Small in the sense the population is hardly, say, 620,000. And there is a state which is there with 0.2 billion of population. So this is the range of diversity we are talking about here. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So these are basically the major limitations what we face. Localized supplier base, varying prices for the similar product. One state is procuring a same laptop at 30,000 rupees of a given spec. Another state is procuring the same laptop with the same specs of 45,000 rupees. So these are some of the issues what we try to take into the consideration while we are generating our procurement portal. Then similarly, the time consuming and manual processes, and this I'm not talking about the manual procurement. It was still an e-procurement prior to government e-marketplace. The different states in India have been using e-procurement in various capacities, some of them up to only the tendering part, some of them including the contract management part, some of them going beyond that and taking the annual procurement plan itself into the consideration. So across the e-procurement model itself, there are several degrees of malware intervention. So truly no procurement system is completely E in the traditional sense. Then of course the administrative overheads which are there. Then if I specifically talk about the federal procurement, there are various policies which change dynamically depending upon the needs of the society. Incorporating all of them real time into the e-procurement system is a challenging task. Can we move on? So basically e-marketplace, government e-marketplace. It's a unified online procurement portal. The policy framework, it was made through GFR Rule 149. Basically, GFR are basically the set of rules issued by Ministry of Finance in Government of India. These are the rules which all the government agencies are bound by to comply. In order to make a economies of scale sustainable procurement policy, it was definitely mandated to bring people out of their comfort zone. So there was a policy which was driving specifically about all the products or services which are available onto the GEM to be compulsorily procured through the portal. So this is the policy support which is mandatory rather. There are different tools available depending upon the volume of transaction what we want to do. We'll see in the subsequent slides. Direct purchase are there, L1, bid auction, then forward auction is there. So the theme fundamental what we are talking about is about efficiency, transparency, inclusiveness, which are quite inherent to any of the e-portals. Efficiency, when I say the average time taken in opening the tender and actually concluding the complete contract, that has actually reduced by around 25% since the inception of GEM. And my comparison scale is another portal itself. It's not the manual e-tendering website. We'll see all those things in the subsequent slide. Can we move on? So in 2020, basically there was this GEM has got a lot of global recognition also in terms of saving money for the government. More than $1 billion we saved in the financial year 1920 as compared to 1819. When I talk financially, it's from April to March. Can we move on? So this gives slight detail about the financial scope what we are discussing. Last year we did the complete GMV value wise roughly around 14 billion. $14 billion worth of gross merchandise value was transacted through the portal, which we are expecting to reach around 20 this year. The graph shows the growth over last 5 years since GEM has come into position. If you see, we have already crossed almost last year's transaction value, which stands last year's it was 13.3. We are somewhere around 12.5. I guess in 10-15 days we'll cross that. So if we see the amount of roughly more than, in fact, 4 months early, we are reaching that. So this is the expanse at which we are progressing. Next one. So now just deep diving into how GEM is built basically. If you see, there are several product and services which are listed on GEM. There are several service categories, more than 260. When I talk about services, I mean if a government buyer wants to hire a manpower hiring service, or they want to hire a consultant, or they want to hire a consultant specifically for implementing IT projects, or if they want to hire a consultant for implementing carbon footprint minimization related kind of a project. All those, we have tried to standardize those specs and brought it onto the portal so that buyer need not start from scratch. Because what we have found that buyers in most of the cases, they do not actually even know what are the options available in the market, what shall be the specifications. So we try to ease that job for them. Then we have more than 5.5 million products which are already available onto the portal. Depending upon the financial value, buyer can go opt for the method of purchase and do the complete execution. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are some, in the broadest sense, what have we achieved till now? First one is cost saving. We have a unique concept of reverse auction. After opening of tender, the least bidder is not automatically awarded the contract. Of course, subjected to certain condition, we can go for auction module, wherein the successful bidders, 50% of them, they will be chosen, and they will be doing auction in the real terms. And whosoever stands L1, they will be granted the order. So this feature particularly requires a lot of digital infrastructure to be built in, a lot of security and secrecy to be maintained. Similarly, next one, guaranteed discount via direct OEM deals. Any of the original equipment manufacturer, when they register onto the GEM, they are mandated to give at least 10% of discount to their MRP, because they are getting so much wide degree of audience. All the government buyers will be able to see their catalogs, they will be able to purchase from them. So it is one of the methods to enforce, best deal for the government. Then of course, demand aggregation is there. In the last financial year, when we compared with the previous financial year, there was a considerable saving up to the extent of 10% of savings were made. Of course, rationalizing it up to the degree of percentages in terms of actually denominator, what we are comparing with. Time efficiency, the tender time cycle, as I said earlier, from 34, it has come down to 24 days. The standard templates, which used to vary even for the purchase of a similar goods, that we have been able to standardize. Fast track procurement, purchases up to 25,000 of values rupees. We are just like that, placing order without any DP, without any actual bidding. That is actually intended to just make the life easier for the buyers. In terms of reach and exclusiveness, MSC share, the micro and small enterprises of India. MSC definition changes from every country to country. Some country defines them in terms of number of employees, what they employ. In India, we have this demarcation based upon the amount of investment what they have done onto the plant and machineries, and actual turnover in the last financial year. We'll be seeing the figures are around somewhere, if I'm not wrong, $125,000 for micro, and similarly for small, it is $6.25 million. If this much of turnover you are crossing, you will not get the benefits. Otherwise, you will get the benefits as per the Government of India orders. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the 55% of the complete transactions which have happened on GEM, they have gone to the micro and small enterprises. So this is what is driving the social inclusion part of sustainable development goals. Some figures are there that 800,000 MSC sellers are there, out of which 130,000 are women entrepreneurs. 39,000 are there who are socially disadvantageous sides of the society. And these all data are digitally captured. They are incorporated in all the tenders without manual intervention from the buyers. All these policies are translated into the digital system so that buyer cannot even overlook and go with the vendor of his choice. That's simply not possible. Then about transparency and fairness, integrated payment systems are there. Buyers need not make any physical payment to any of the vendors. We have made integration in terms of the public financial management system, the budgeted entities of the buyer department. Budgeted entity, I mean whichever department is funded out of the treasury of the government, their payment actually happens automatically without intervention from the buyer department entirely. We'll go into the detail of this one also. Then incident management, I spoke about online grievance redressal system. Buyers and sellers can raise complaints against them. And in a forum like portal, they will be debating. Each of them will be giving the proofs in their favor. And there is an independent mechanism to verify backend in a maker-checker format. It's not a single person deciding. Randomly, that will be associated to one of the GEM officials, and those concerns will be addressed. And in case sellers are not satisfied with that, there is an appellate authority measure is available within GEM. Then, of course, dynamic vendor rating system is there, depending upon the timely deliveries, fairness of the catalogs, what they have uploaded, the geographical presence of that particular seller. Based on those criteria, we are trying to assign a single digit figure out of 5 rating is given, and buyer can make those choices while taking the orders. Next, please. So these are some of the key statistics. There are roughly more than 60,000 buyers currently registered on through the government portal. When I say buyers, these all of them are government buyers, including the companies, government companies, wherever government is making some kind of stake, or is they are having decision-making authorities. So they are mandated to procure through GEM. Sellers and service providers, 5.1 million service providers are available on GEM with a product catalog of 5.4 million. Total number of orders which has been executed on the portal is 11.6 million. And the gross merchandise value as it stands on 30th of November is $42 billion. This much of transaction the portal has transacted through since its inception in 2016. Next slide, please. This briefly gives about the overview and architecture. So if we just look into the business capability section, we have independent modules. We follow completely modular design so that any instructions passed on by the government at any point of time, we are able to adapt as fast as possible without tweaking least amount of modules. So first one is seller management. We have the concept of doing vendor assessment before onboarding them through a verifying agency. Similarly, buyer management system is there. This includes the registration process of any government buyer when they get onboarded. Product category management, this includes the elaborate procedure for making a category available onto the GEM. Its continuous maintenance, upgradation, sanitization, all these things are taken care. Similarly, we have that for services as well. Then contract management module is separate. Catalog management is basically the complete category management, including the standardization, category management itself, the right data models which needs to be followed for every technical parameters which tries to standardize the product specs. Then we have incident management system. We have already spoken about this. Then request management. We have a system of online wherein any of the buyers, they can make a request for a particular category either to be upgraded if they feel that the old category has been become obsolete. So that is also inbuilt into the system. Then we have a full-fledged method of audit trails in order to see on what basis a given order was placed in order to enforce any of the subsequent audit related inquiries. Then dashboards are there, various kinds. Sellers do get their dashboards from where they can just manage all of their orders. Buyers also do the same. Then AI ML based use cases. This we are moving into, not entirely done. Here basically we are trying to utilize the facilities of capabilities of AI in order to weed out the wrong catalogs from the system in a transparent way. Then of course support functions, it remains available in all the organization. Payments part, IFMS, PFMS, these are basically financial management systems of Government of India. IFMS is meant for the states. So these are duly integrated with the e-procurement post-contract part so that payment can be made seamlessly. And moreover, before placement of any order, the funds are blocked so that sellers are ensured about the payment. In case of product, there are certain percentages which are fixed up. Again, for services, up to 2 billing cycles, we block that. Then there are various e-procurement modes. This will be looking into the subsequent slides. Then learning management system, LMS is there. This is basically the training module available for any of the buyers or sellers to educate themselves. Various videos of using any of the modules. This is provided over there. On top, if you see the various stakeholders, users are the government buyers, GEM users themselves, then the sellers and service providers. Then of course the integration part is there, PFMS, IFMS, various payment gateways are there. Banks, MCA 21, basically it's a Ministry of Corporate Affairs e-government version, wherein all the validations about the authenticity of the details, the credentials of the permanent account number of the sellers or service providers are API, through API they are already interlinked. So whenever somebody registers online, we need not require any physical documentation from the sellers. We just check their credentials through this API integration itself. Similarly, India Post, it's world's largest link postal system. So this is also integrated into the GEM portal. If the service provider wants, at the time of receipt of order or the creation of their seller accounts, what they can do is they can opt for the services of India Post, and whenever the consignment is ready for dispatch, they can utilize the facilities. And real time, they can monitor the status of the delivery of the goods. UIDAI, this is basically enabling us to authenticate the personal information of the sellers through their Aadhaar card number. This is also real-time authentication can be done here. Then there are several inspection bodies mandated by the buyer themselves for certain crucial items which must be inspected by a certain set of agencies only. So they are also real-time integrated with us. Next slide, please. So basically these are various stages. Some of them we have already spoken. Registration, it is basically buyers and seller registration. Will not go into the repetition of that. Then catalog management system, CMS, this is the heart of complete GEM. Basically, this is the method by which we are trying to maintain the 3 pillars of public procurement, that is maintaining the price legacy, maintaining the brand independence, maintaining the price reasonability. In order to assure that these things are duly formulated, this is the set of guidelines what we follow. Broadly speaking, there are various stages. Like first we try to standardize the product, like a standard we follow is currently that is UNSPSC. I have seen in some of the slides we were discussing about that. So same thing we are following as well. Then we have categorically decided that which product and services which we will not be selling onto the portal, because we want to make sure the public goods services which are competitive, which addresses the larger concerns of the buyer, they are only onboarded onto the portal. Just to give you an estimate about this, on an average, if you see India's GDP, it's around $3.5 trillion, and roughly around $700 billion we spend on public procurement. So what we are targeting since till I think 2028 is to bring out the GMV value up to 5% of the total GDP of India, which amounts to roughly $106 billion. Currently we stand at 20, means by the end of this financial year we are targeting 20. So over next 5 years we are aiming for around $105 billion. Then order placement and fulfillment activities, buying modes, this will be seen into the next slides. Depending upon the value of the purchase, what are different modes by which buyer can place an order. Then there are certain additional features available, like bunching, bundling, means if more than 2 similar products are required to be procured into the same cart, that can be done, just like as you do in Amazon. Then order fulfillment, this includes complete receipt of the order, supply, quality related inspections. Contract management, this includes the payment part, and of course the post-contract warranty related issues. Payments, these are done through PFMS, IFMS and GAPA, etc. GPA, it's basically a unique concept given by GEM for ensuring the timely payment of the suppliers from the buyers who are not the budgeting entities, like the government companies, which are meant to be self-sustainable and rather making profit for the government. So what we have done, basically we have opened separate account for them, and every time an order is placed, a certain quantity of the amount what they are keeping in the bank, that is blocked. And that cannot be released unless that order is cancelled due to certain reasons. So once a money is catered for a given order, it remains there itself. You cannot create another order without disbursing that off. Next slide, please. Then we provide certain decision support systems, business intelligence and analytics. As Chris was talking in the earlier presentation, there is this enormous amount of data what we are getting. There is endless possibility what we can use in order to make the complete procurement less discretionary onto the officials. Establishing price reasonability. Here we have taken a leap. We'll talk about that in next slide probably. The primary objective of any public procurement, which is there to establish the price reasonability, this is a big burden of the government officials. We are trying to offload that using AI/ML and certain other technologies, wherein you need to just create your bid. Rather, not even create the bid, you have to just select a product that this is what you want. System will take care of the entire bidding. It will give you, after 3 or 4 days of period, it will give an option whether this is the person who is going to get the order. Are you okay? If you are okay with the specs, you can go ahead and place the order. You need not bother what is the right rate, quality, everything will be taken care. Buyer and seller rating, this we have already talked about. Vendor assessment, this is an elaborate process what we follow before onboarding any of the product or service provider onto the system. Then audit trail, this we maintain. As a communication for buyers and sellers, there is a due LMS, what I've spoken previously. The complete training material is available. Then throughout India, we have kept our contact centers, business facilitators who will assist the buyers in order to create any of the bid if they are finding it difficult. Then dispute resolution and incident management. This is the module which takes care of any of the complaints. Data security, it goes without saying. This is the most important part. Without this, none of the procurement portal can exist actually. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are the modes of procurement what we do. For purchases less than $300, buyer can straight outrightly select any of the product without bothering about its rate. They can go ahead and place the order. Then push button procurement. This is what I told, up to $1,200. You can select it, price reasonability, you don't have to certify, system will take care of that. L1, any amount which is bigger than 300 and less than 6,000 US dollars, they can be procured through L1, the least bidder. Then bid and RA, they are available. Basically, L1, what we do here, to be elaborate, we try to compare the offerings by 3 OEMs. They have to be different OEMs, that's the key. So that we try to establish that any specs which are made by the buyer, they are generic enough to be procured from the public sellers which are available publicly. In case there are less catalogs, then they have to go compulsorily for the bidding so that any of the potential bidder, they are able to see that this is the bid which is available. Would he like to upload his own catalog and try to participate in the bid? Then for the specific purchases like proprietary article certificates, here what we try to do, we take a certificate from the buyer that for so and so reason, we want to procure this particular brand or whatever it may be. Still, the competitive bidding will happen between all the sellers who are registered for supplying that particular brand. Then there are certain other features. Forward auction, which I briefly spoke earlier, it's the module which is meant for basically selling of all the used scraps or selling of land. So these kind of auctions basically where the successful bidder is determined based upon the highest bidder. Those are done through forward auction. Then custom bid feature is there. The specification, if you are finding that it is not available onto the GEM, you can create your own custom specification and go ahead. with the bidding process. Of course, you have to certify that, yes, there was no due category was available, so you had to opt for that. Then we have a feature of buyback, where we have selected certain categories, and you say, for example, if you have got a motor and it's in partly good state, so you want to offer it to the best bidder and get the rate accordingly adjusted. So that feature is available. Next slide, please. Now this is the FMIS integration part. First one is the banks. More than I think figure has moved up to 22 now. More than 22 banks I think we have got integrated ourselves with. The GEM pool account, as I spoke earlier, that the non-budgeted entity, the corporations of government who are funded by their own revenues, they have to open an account, because we don't have a PFMS kind of a system available for them. So the GEM pool account is a unique concept in GEM. Then we have caution money, which are taken by every service provider when they are registering onto the portal. Then EMD, all of you might be familiar about this, bid security amount. EPPG, these are basically not taken in the physical sense. Through SFMS system of the banks, we are getting real-time authentication of the EMD and performance bank guarantee, what the sellers are committing. So there is no physical movement of money. The online authentication is being done here. Then, of course, there are certain corporations which have got their own ERP system, enterprise resource pooling, planning, wherein they don't want to migrate, complete their architecture. So we have integrated our portal with them, not selectively in the sense of, the basic data regarding the tender. After conclusion, the orders credentials, they are migrated to their ERP system of its own. Then PFMS, IFMS we have discussed about. Authentication is there. Then similarly, verification. We do not take any physical document for registration of either buyer or seller. This is all done through integrated mechanisms available with various ministries and other government organizations like Aadhaar. It's a project, basically every Indian, more or less majority of Indians are having this in their individual capacities. So this is one of the real-time individual credentials verification mechanism what we are utilizing. Then PAN, permanent account number. This is basically an identifier for any business person or individual in India. Then GSTN, we have migrated for the indirect taxes to goods and service taxes from July 2017 onwards. So GEM is duly integrated with that. Then, of course, there are several other startups, FSSAI guidelines, which are there, MCA 21 I have spoken. So these all verifications are done in a paperless manner. E-signing is being done. All the signatures are through digital signatures or e-signing. Logistics, India Post example I have spoken. Then tender information, CPPP was the erstwhile or rather currently also going central public procurement portal of Government of India. There is a direct integration in the sense that whichever tender which is being issued on CPPP, it will be naturally shown on GEM and the vice versa. Because we promote any of the tenders to be procured only through GEM so that the standardization can be maintained. Then financing, in order to make larger access to the market, there are two parts basically. We have to first make the availability of market for the seller, and then finance part. So for finance part, what we have done is there is a GEM Sahay initiative. Against this, what we do, by showing in order, if a seller has received through government e-marketplace, they can get loan from the bank. So this is a feature which we have introduced last year. Then there is a TRES system. TRES is basically for the buyers, the government companies majorly, who wants at certain interest rate, bank will make the payment for them to the service provider and charge certain interest for the buyers. So this is an option available. Then there is a payment gateway, the usual one. Next slide, please. These are roughly some figures. We have more than 40 integrations done. Entities which are integrated around 100, and APIs more than 110. I think this has gone somewhere around 130 now. Next, please. Well, that was primarily basics about GEM. And now we will move into the larger issue of today's discussion, sustainable development, the three agendas, that economic viability, environmental protection, social equity. These in an individual sense and in somewhat overlapping sense, we are trying to make in one way or the other. I have a small video clip if it can be played. It is basically one of the sellers telling his own experiences. The key pointers are basically the amount of outreach what he has got through GEM in getting the order from completely different, distant located buyer, and how he has been able to deliver that. The complete, paperless kind of a system what he has utilized available on GEM, through which there was seamless, not only order receipt, complete post-contract management has been done. Can we play it? And again, this is an example of an MSME supplier only, who immediately after registering on GEM, within some 25 to 30 days, he has got his first order, and unexpectedly from a buyer whom he never had known existed.
GEM, Government E-Marketplace.
जब मैं जेम पे आया तो मैंने जेम पे रजिस्ट्रेशन कराया. After I came to know about the GEM portal, with an easy registration process, I got onboarded on GEM. And in no time, I started bidding on the GEM portal. Within 20 to 25 days, I got selected as L1 and received an order from a government school in Jammu and Kashmir. I felt so happy by this initiative of the government of India, that is GEM, that sitting in Uttar Pradesh, I received an order from Jammu and Kashmir. The whole process was hassle-free and smooth. This was first step toward selling my services to government buyers directly through the GEM portal. I received my first order of manpower services for rupees 1 crore. Later, I also extended my services from providing manpower services to security services. With the help of the GEM portal, I not only expanded my business horizon but also act as a catalyst in achieving rapid growth of my business. I am really thankful to Government of India for providing us with the opportunity of sell services product directly to the government buyers through GEM portal.
So that was basically one of the testimonials. Slide number 17, you can come to. Yeah. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it has come. Okay. About economic viability, micro and small enterprises, we are trying to support them by implementing all the policies of the government through the portal. Artisans and weavers, basically the traditional art of India, which is there in different parts of country, we are trying to make exclusive outlets for them onto the portal. Similarly, now cooperative societies are also registered as a buyers on the portal. Integrations we have seen previously, more than 40 integrations we have done. Then farmer producing organizations are also registered, although it's just in the nascent stages. Then in terms of social equity, startups are there. Then women entrepreneur, as per the policy of government, certain percentage of all the procurements has to be, reserved for the women entrepreneurs of their total annual procurement plan. GEM Sahay we have discussed, wherein we are issuing, the loans to the sellers based upon the orders what they have received on GEM. Then about environmental protection, there are certain green ACs concept. It was launched a couple of years back on GEM, wherein ACs which are air conditioners which are meeting stringent conditions, they are only registered, and those only are to be procured by the government buyers. Paperless economy, we have been able to save roughly around some 550 million sheets of paper by migrating to electronic procurement through GEM. Then solar power, we have exclusively dedicated services available on GEM, by which any rooftop solar power plant can be installed onto the government buyers, wherever they find suitable places. Then bamboo-based products, which we have separate set of outlets available only for these things, which we are utilizing to help the tribal people. Then electric vehicles, this is the buzzword going on. Government of India has got a lot of drive on this. There are several policies and incentives which are given. So we have provided exclusive dedicated services for hiring electric vehicles for all the government buyers. And government is pushing for utilizations of these vehicles instead of the usual fossil fuel based fuels. Then waste management services are available regarding the consultancy, how they should be actually gone about. So these are basically the broad verticals under which we are trying to meet the sustainable development goals. Next slide, please. Yeah, indicator 12.7.1, basically. Third point, degree of sustainable public procurement policies and action plan implementation. So sustainable public procurement, if we try to simplify this definition, if you can come to the second last bullet point, purchasing the goods and services to achieve optimal value for money. Value for money, these three words are key here. Maybe a couple of decades back, the meaning of value was completely in the economic sense. Now that sense has changed to include the social and environmental concerns as well. So any of these three things, if they are being compromised, probably it's not a value for money deal what we have entered into. We have seen previously also the various figures have been told that roughly around 20% of GDP worldwide, every country is spending. Next. So India basically has a huge scope. As I spoke earlier, around $700 billion we are spending on our public procurement. For this purpose, there is a dedicated task force on sustainable procurement which is available, wherein GEM is also one of the members. And this slide is about the economic drive. We'll see in economic, social, and then environmental. So the micro enterprises, MSCs, morning also there was a question about this. How we cater to that is the definition of micro enterprises in India is produced here. Turnover is around $625,000. And for a small, it is $6.2 million. If you are meeting these conditions, you will be classified as a MSC enterprise and you will gain the benefits of the policies of the government. So what we are doing in that sense is that we are raising the awareness about the business opportunities. Various policies of the government is also encouraging the buyers to go for outsourcing if that particular operation in a, say, manufacturing plant, if it is available among the MSCs, instead of producing that particular item in-house, you should go for outsourcing of that. Then realization of payment, reserving funds, we have discussed that about the blocking certain percentages. Single window registration, this is an initiative of the MSC ministry, wherein just through a single window, any of the seller who are meeting MSC criteria, they can get onboarded, and we have integrated that process with GEM. When they are registering as a micro or a small enterprises, automatically they will get an option to get registered on GEM also, if they opt to. Next. So what MSCs they can do is they can filter out. Basically, the government buyers, they can filter out non-MSC buyers while placing orders. Integration with Treasury and PFMS have been done in order to ensure, block the amount before placement of the order. The implementation of MSME ministry's order has been completely done. And we discussed this last point earlier also, around 55% of the complete GMV transacted on GEM are going to MSCs. Next. And by the way, when we talk about MSC order, there is no compromise in terms of quality. The quality audit plan, which needs to be submitted by all the buyers, it remains the same. It does not give any exemptions to MSC buyers in terms of quality. Social inclusion, in order to address access of market, the disadvantageous sections of the society, we have created a separate core outlet products which can be procured only from them, and buyers have got great degree of freedom in placing direct orders through them, which includes the women entrepreneurs, the people who are there with the disabilities, the tribal entrepreneurs, startups, self-help groups, artisans wears, and Hunar Haat. Hunar Haat is basically the people who are purchasing making the ancient art and crafts in order to provide them sustainability. This is an initiative by GEM. Some figures are there, how many women-led businesses are there on GEM. Then if we see access to the market part, we have created 8 core outlets. These outlets basically mean the category of products which are registered only meant for the disadvantageous sections of the society. Then onboarding of cooperating society, this has been done. The panchayats are basically the village level governance. This is what we call panchayat in India. So they are onboarded as a buyer onto the portal. They can also utilize economies of scale, and the various range of sellers which are registered on GEM, they can also enjoy the benefits. Next. Then there are some figures about artisans and weavers. I guess this presentation would be available, so we can rush through that. And access to finance, we have already spoken about this, GEM Sahay, and exemption of payment of the caution money. Yeah, caution money part I just left out. Basically, before every seller is mandated to give some caution money in case the portal is used beyond its mandate by the service provider, that money is forfeited by the portal. So this is this particular caution money we are exempting for certain underserved sellers. Next. These are a visual representation of these 8 core outlets, what we spoke about. The khadi products, startups, we have green gold collections, then women organizations, women entrepreneurs, then self-help groups are there. Next, please. On the environmental front, green procurement, I just given you an example. If you see the first bullet point here, making the procurement process digital and paperless, we have saved up to more than 550 million paper sheets. We are trying to develop more green products, green air conditioners, eco-mark papers, bamboo-based products, eco-friendly disinfectants are registered onto the portal. Next. Then solar power renewable products can be filtered out. Battery powered e-vehicles can be filtered out by the buyers. Easily they can see which brand, which model, which is available, and they can schedule their specs accordingly. Then we have made green transition service also available in order to meet the net zero targets. Government can utilize them. Then forward auction we have discussed about, in order to dispose of the obsolete assets, it can be utilized. The buyback also we have discussed. So these are basically the ways and means by which we are trying to minimize the carbon footprint on the Mother Earth. I guess this might be the last slide. Next. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you very much for the patient hearing. I can take any of the questions if you have. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Manoj. Thanks for a very detailed explanation about the GEM system. I know it's quite exhaustive, so we probably need a couple of sessions for you to take you through it completely. But thank you very much for explaining the key features of GEM. Incidentally, we are working with GEM now from ADB's perspective, and we have almost about to finalize a case study explaining the integration of GEM system with the FMIS. Okay, so we are almost done. Probably within a month or 6 weeks, it should be final. So once it is done, hopefully we'll publish it. Then that will give a lot of detail about the GEM pool account, how the public sector undertakings, how the money is committed, so that how the suppliers are assured payment, even when they are, even when public sector undertakings buy through GEM. So this is something, many of you would also want to implement down the line, and you will find it quite helpful. So the way it has been done is very detailed documentation is done so that anybody who's trying to implement FMIS integration will find this very helpful. Okay, so thank you, and let's go on to the next speaker. We'll take the questions at the end of the session. So we have another excellent speaker, Mr. Richard Gargrave. He's actually based out of London right now. I mean, it would be slightly better. I think it's about 7:30 in the morning as compared to Chris, who started at about 6 o'clock. So he's an associate director from EBRD, and he has 40 years of public procurement and project management experience with Crown Agents and the World Bank. And now he is with EBRD. He is in the headquarters of EBRD. Richard is a project manager responsible for concept, design, development and implementation of the SaaS contract of EBRD's client e-procurement portal. Okay, so he is going to explain why contract and financial management should be considered an integral part of e-procurement. Okay, so this is primarily EBRD's procurement systems he's going to talk about. And he is online, I can see him. Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Let me know if not. My internet connection is a little bit variable, so I hope that we can get through the slides without any problems. Okay, very good. So we've heard the very good, interesting presentation from Manoj, and I'm going to tell you about EBRD's e-procurement portal, which is called ESEP. And Manoj was saying he has 11 million orders worth $42 billion. And now you're going to see something from the other end of the spectrum. EBRD doesn't place that many orders for its clients. We have about 300 contracts per year, worth about 2 billion euros for each of those contracts. So what I aim to go through today is just to show you a little bit about the ESEP platform, brief introduction on how that works and who we are using it with, and then looking at how the contract management and financial management information systems are merged in with the ESEP data. As Ramanathan was saying, the initial concept for many public sector e-procurement systems was that of an e-tendering portal, which just looked at the notices and then on to the e-tendering and getting the responses. With the ESEP, we've now moved that right the way through to an end-to-end process. And I hope that you'll find it interesting for your national systems and the work that you're doing with other IFIs. So next slide, please. Just for those of you not very familiar with EBRD and wondering why we're at an ADB presentation, just to show you that we do overlap with some ADB countries of operations, and all the countries that you can see here highlighted, so as from as far east or west as Morocco, right the way across to Mongolia. So all of those countries that are borrowing from EBRD are now using the ESEP portal. So next slide, please. So this just gives you a brief overview of the landing page for ESEP. So those of you who are interested, you can log in and view this page at esep.ebrd.com. So this is just a browser-based web application, so it's accessible to everybody. Anybody can register in the portal, and you can look at notices free of charge. And if you are interested in participating, then you need to register in the system, and that gives you free of charge access to any of the tenders in the system. You can see some brief stats at the bottom of the page. So since in the implementation of this system in 2015, we have 757 signed contracts worth nearly 6 billion euros. and we have 700-800 procurements in process or planned. Next slide, please. So the ESEP portal, this is used by EBRD's clients. So this is not used by the EBRD for its own procurement. So we are not buying anything for EBRD itself. This portal is used by borrowers of EBRD bank loans and recipients of grants. So any public sector project which the bank signs, and we do, as I say, around 200-300 of these projects per year, they will all be using the ESEP platform, which is a cloud-based system and accessible from any internet browser. We operated it since 2015 on a voluntary basis and made it mandatory since 2020. So we are still the only IFI to actually offer this service to our public sector clients. So this is an EBRD designed and monitored and managed system, which is provided by a third-party service provider based in UK, actually. But we are responsible for the development and implementation of this service. So EBRD, as I mentioned before, so unlike Manoj with his 11 million orders, we work for large projects only. So these are very large infrastructure projects. I think the largest single contract we have in ESEP at the moment is 1.25 billion euros. That's for one single contract. So these are major construction and works projects predominantly. And we also have a number of goods contracts, things like buses and trains, locomotives and train carriages, these type of things, metro cars, and consultancy contracts. So around about 2 to 3 billion euros per year is our estimated contract signing process. Next slide, please. Just some very brief stats. So we have 331 active projects, and this is from 28 countries of operation. So every public sector borrowing country of the bank is now using ESEP. We've just signed up some new projects in Azerbaijan. So these will be the first 3 projects that have actually been signed in the public sector in Azerbaijan, I think, for the last 6 years. And they will be the 28th country who are using ESEP. Some of the stats we've already been through. We have about 31 billion euros worth of projects in the system. That includes EBRD money and also other donor funds and joint co-financing. So we do actually have one project in Uzbekistan, Talimarjan power station, which is co-financed with ADB. And the ADB are leading that project using ESEP for the procurement of that particular contract, which I believe has now been signed, but I can't confirm that definitely. We have about 1,700 bank users, client users, 140 bank users, and around 20,000 suppliers, and these are from more than 150 countries. So we have suppliers from as far away as Peru and the Caribbean and anywhere in between. Okay, next slide, please. So I was asked to talk today about how we manage the contract management in the tender process. So as most of you will know, if not all of you will know, that effective contract management is an essential part of the procurement process. And what we're aiming for with our control over the procurement management is to minimize the risk, both for the bank and for the client, and actually indeed for the suppliers. We are doing that through systematic and effective management of the procurement process at every stage. So this covers anything through from the procurement itself through to the contract creation, the implementation of that contract, completion and analysis, and through into payment and control. So in EBRD, the contract management starts with the tender documents. So we have a detailed set of terms and conditions in all of our tenders. We have a standard set of contracts for different types of goods, works and services. And contract management also involves the procurement planning process right through to implementation and reporting. I'll deal with variations a bit later on, but the management, which is done by the clients, would also include handling claims. These are engineering claims, not complaints, as we heard on the previous presentation, and also resolving disputes and payments. Next slide, please. So why is contract management important? Well, if you look at the average tender time span, this is a very, very optimistic average in terms of e-tendering in EBRD. Some of our projects actually take a lot longer than this to reach contract signature stage. But anyway, what I was trying to aim at with this particular slide is really in terms of the fraud and corruption risk. So in terms of the fraud and corruption risk, most of that risk is at the back end of the contracting process, which is once the contract has actually been signed. This is when the money and funds start to flow, and this is when the opportunities and the risks are greater in terms of actual fraud and corruption opportunities. Next slide, please. I'm sure you're all familiar with the basics of contract management. These are the main factors we're looking at in terms of engineering contracts. So the bulk of the contracts we do are large works contracts, which are based on FIDIC style contracts. So under the FIDIC contracts, you have a separate engineer who's responsible for reviewing claims and managing the time for completion and the cost of any changes and variations. And indeed, if there are any proposals to amend the scope of works or the bill of quantities, all of these aspects are managed generally by the engineer under a FIDIC contract. And if not under a FIDIC contract, then the client, who would be the signature to any contract under an EBRD loan or grant, would therefore be responsible for managing those particular factors, time, scope and cost, in any change going forward on contract management. Next slide, please. So why should this be an essential part of the e-procurement system? As we previously heard and we previously mentioned, primarily the first e-procurement systems were really for e-tendering. They only took place up to contract placement. And this was partly in response to management expectations that e-procurement platforms were only designed to manage the processes covered by the procurement law. So most procurement laws only cover that period up until contract placement. Once the contract is signed, then that comes under other legal jurisdictions and is not necessarily covered by a procurement law. So although the e-procurement systems as initially developed, and EBRD's ESEP platform was indeed the same, it was developed primarily initially as an e-tendering platform, and we have now increased and expanded the scope of that system to cover contract management and indeed link into financial management systems. So the benefit of the e-procurement systems is to enable process control, accuracy and transparency, and ensure that they meet the rules, regulations and any applicable laws. They're essentially designed to ensure the process is economic, fair and transparent, and certainly with EBRD having access to public funds, and no doubt it's the same in your own procurement platforms, there is a need for specific oversight in respect of fraud and corruption. Yeah, I've been through that part. The potentially leaves the signed contracts open to manipulation, and this is where the contract management portal really comes into its own. Where you have a works or a services contract which is subject to variation and subject to particular cost and time overruns or cost and time changes, you may find out that the end result is significantly different from that which was originally planned. I think we did an audit many years ago, and we found actually that one consultancy contract had been signed initially around $250,000, and when it finally came to a close, the actual cost of that contract, when all the invoices were added up, was more than $5 million. So this just goes to show that we need to have full and direct control over the entire contract process. 4 eyes controls and audit controls are important, but the ease of obtaining the information and data and managing that data exchange between the different stages of the contract and procurement process is essential in order to avoid manipulation by third parties. Next slide, please. So how does ESEP manage that particular process, and how do we try to keep control over these items? So the original contract documents are instantly available. So any contract which is uploaded by clients is sent through to the bank systems automatically. So this is available to anyone in EBRD who needs to have access and monitor those contracts. Any user on a particular project, so ESEP is set up on a project by project basis to keep the information confidential between those users who have access to each particular project, and they can log, monitor or control any change to the awarded contract in the system. So changes which affect the material scope or time or cost overruns can therefore easily be verified. And this is particularly important with works contracts because we have over the years developed a type of contract where we include provisional sums or contingency amounts already in the contract sum. So that sum is already built into the contract price, but to be determined by the engineer during the implementation of that contract. And this needs particular care and attention. So any change orders, variations and amendments can be logged and documents saved in a central depository for ease of reference. System reports are generated by bank users. That enables us to determine any unusual patterns and generate red flags for our compliance officers and other investigators to conduct additional research. Contract award notices, just to cover Chris's point about OCDS, we do want to be transparent and open about our contracts, and these contract award notices are automatically produced and published by the system. Next slide, please. Just to give you now just a few screenshots. I know the probably not that easy to see on the screen, but I think you'll be able to have access to this presentation, and hopefully you can have a closer look if you want to do that. So each project is set up separately in the system, and user access is controlled to authorized client users, authorized bank users, to view information which may be confidential in relation to that project. So the project manager view covers not only from the procurement planning module right through to the procurement process itself, but also goes through to the contract signature and the contract award notice. So all the information and the links to further information is included in the project dashboard, in the procurement dashboard, and that will be updated as the contract progresses along the procurement cycle. Next slide, please. So you won't be able to read this, but if you want to look at our notices, if you go to ecep.ebrd.com, you have a variety of notices from open tender notices to contract award notices, and these are automatically published and provide all the basic key data in terms of any signed contracts, including details of lots if the lots were awarded, and including details of joint ventures. We have a lot of contracts placed with joint ventures, not necessarily official joint ventures, legal joint ventures, but these are, let's say, collaborations between contractors, and you will find a list in the contract award notice of the joint ventures and all the partners and who is the lead partner. Next slide, please. Again, this apologies if you can't really read the detail on the slide, but I thought it might be useful for you to see some screenshots. So when the contract is placed, the client will have access to the contract manager module. He will enter the key data for the contracts, which then pulls through to EBRD's own systems and reports. He will enter details of the contracting entity. So this is the supplier or the joint venture, including all the joint venture partners, including any joint venture agreements between the partners, and of course the signed contract document. And all of these documents are automatically sent through to the EBRD system. Once the client has uploaded those documents, this is subject to what we call a no objection. So this means that the bank is satisfied the process has been handled in accordance with our rules, and therefore that contract is eligible for bank finance. So the original details are displayed on the contract manager portal, so everyone can see what the original value was and the original details of that signed contract. Next slide, please. In the event that there are any changes, all of these changes are sent to the bank for no objection. But you can see easily in the contract management portal, it will give you the signed contract value and the latest value of any revision. So this will update depending on how many revisions there are. I mean, we can have, I think I saw one contract which had 140 variation orders. It's not particularly unusual when our engineering contracts run for 3 years or longer. And this is why it's essential to keep a track of these contract variations, so we can differentiate between amendments, variations and change orders. Next slide, please. And this is exactly what I was saying. So we can differentiate between the different types of change orders and change controls. And we now have a modification to the system to enable the client to upload a draft of the variation, because we don't want to be in a situation where the client signs an agreement or signs an amendment to the contract and then the bank are not happy with that amendment, and we have to get that signed variation annulled. So how it runs now is that if the client and the engineer and the contractor have a change, then they push this change through as a draft, which is reviewed by the bank and no objected by the bank, and then the client will submit the signed variation also for no objection, which will then trigger the financing, if any financing is associated with that. So you can see the value of the changes clearly displayed. You can see the revision of the contract price clearly displayed. And also you can download a contract data sheet, which will give you all of the procurement data for that entire contract. Additionally, emails are sent to key staff to tell them of any change, so that none of this comes as a surprise. Next slide, please. So moving on to the financial management portal. Unlike your public procurement systems, the EBRD is not a party to the contract. So the contracts themselves are signed between the bank's client and the contracting party. And we are not directly liable for payments in that contract. So the client relationship is governed by the loan agreement or the grant agreement, which is signed by that client with the bank. So the bank's systems are designed to separate out the payment because they're linked to the loan and the covenants and any agreements which the client has to undertake in accordance with that loan agreement before payment can be made to suppliers. So disbursement under a bank loan or grant can be made to a client special account, or it can be made direct to contractors, and this is all subject to disbursement requests. So this is a legal document which the client will send to the bank, requesting the bank to pay a particular entity in accordance with the contract, which the bank has no objected through ESEP. So the ESEP contracts include any contractual payment arrangements. The contractor will submit invoices to the client in the normal way, and they will submit those along to the bank with their disbursement application. The bank will check the invoices against the bank account details in the contract, and the bank account details are captured in the bank's procurement system. So we have 4i checks at every stage throughout the procurement process, so right from the procurement planning right the way through to any change orders and contract management and payments or disbursement requests, I should say. There's always two people checking those documents and providing what we call the no objection. So the ESEP system will log every single no objection. There is a full audit trail which can be investigated both by the client and by the bank. So it's fully transparent to the parties that need to have that information. And we are now moving towards a system integration with between ESEP and other bank systems which relate to the actual payment itself. Next slide, please. So how we've done that, we've actually started an automation process using an automation robot. So ESEP is a relatively new, under EBRD rules, under EBRD systems, this is a relatively recent program. The financial management system is quite old. So this particular system, you have a screenshot there on screen. This particular system is more than 25 years old. And although we have a bank-wide program to upgrade all the IT systems, we are pretty much at the end of the queue to get this updated. So what we've done is we've taken the data from ESEP, and we have a robotics program which now takes the information from an ESEP report and actually physically transposes it into this other system called CRA, Contract Review and Awards. So each of these fields you can see on the screen, and there's quite a number of different tabs. So the automation robot actually manually keys in the data from the ESEP report into this rather old system. And surprisingly, it works quite well. So we have cut the processing time at the moment. Manually, this takes the processing of the payments to enter into this system manually takes between 2 and 3 hours, because they have to collate data from various sources. Using the automation robot, the ESEP data can be uploaded in 5 minutes. So that creates a massive time saving for staff. And it also ensures that the information continuity. So instead of having somebody manually keying in the data which is taken from ESEP, this is automatically programmed and automatically transferred through the robotics system, so we can ensure that the data is not corrupted. The only data which is not taken automatically is the bank account details, because this is subject to an extra layer of checks and goes through sanctions checks and other authorization processes. Next slide, please. Again, just saying that the automation adds the data into the system. Once the data has been correctly added, and this also, you can see through some of the highlights that this also includes all of the revisions. So if there's any change order or variation order which increases the contract cost, which has been no objected by the bank, then this is also transposed into this system. The other manual step that needs to be taken in the bank, because it's linked to disbursements and because the values are so huge, there is a manual step to click a button which says send to SAP. So SAP is the payment system that's used by the bank. We send this data to SAP, which is then cross-referenced with data from the loan and grant management unit, to ensure that payments can actually be made. Next slide, please. Again, all revisions are included and transposed from ESEP into this other system, so we can ensure the continuity of data, and we can make sure that the data flows not only is available in the ESEP system, but also in the bank's legacy systems. Next slide, please. So just to summarise, so we have a fully integrated, now interconnected system covering the whole procurement cycle from planning right the way through to payment. It does use different systems, but I think that's inevitable in the current world, and I don't think there's really any way around that. But the main thing is that the data we have in the bank is now taken directly from source wherever possible. So we've reduced the manual keying, we've reduced the repetition of data, and that enables us to spend more time on checking the quality of the data and making sure that the data is harmonized at the various different stages. We've ensured there's a 4 eyes principle in all of the connected systems, and certainly in ESEP we have this at every single stage in the procurement process. So all project and procurement data is fully accessible So any EBRD staff who have the authority to look at that data, because some of it is confidential. All the project and procurement data, procurement documentation is automatically sent through from the ESEP system to the bank's archiving system. So we have all of that data, including changes, including variations, and any change orders and change requests, and the authorities, no objections from the bank. That all goes through to the bank's system. It's very important that there is a depository of that documentation, and the bank want to ensure that we hold copies of the key documents in our own system and not just rely on cloud-based system for key documents. The contract management module is linked to both the procurement data and the payment data, and therefore this enables us to have a seamless view of the data right the way through from start to finish. And I think that's the last slide. The next slide, please. Indeed it is. So if there are any questions, you have my details there on the presentation. We're always happy to hear from you. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. In fact, this morning there was a discussion, a query sent to ADB, Ms. Galia, on why is it that ADB is not handling their project procurement in a centralized platform. So EBRD is another way of doing it. I think you presented that. So yeah, there are different ways of handling. I think we're very happy to see that. There are different approaches to solving the issue. And the second thing I noticed in the presentation is robotic automation. I see more and more use of robotic automation used so that the effort involved in integrating systems and errors involved is getting minimized. I've got a couple of notes already as a moderator that the session has to be closed because there is somebody in the US waiting and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so we just have to please bear with me. I know. In fact, I started out by saying that the questions would be nice. So, but right now, it's good that we close it at the moment. The questions can be taken offline. Thank you for sharing your email address. Anybody who has questions, you can send the mail. And then, of course, Mr. Manoj is here. And any questions you have, you can catch up with him during the tea time. Let's break for tea. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. 1 second. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ram. Thank you very much, everyone. I actually just wanted to say that there will be no pause for the break because we are 30 minutes behind. However, we invite you to grab your coffee, your drinks, and bring it back in if you absolutely need to get those. But you are free and welcome to step out and grab your snack and come back in. We need to perhaps address the questions in the end. Because we do have, in fact, I should tell you, for this next session that I will be moderating, I am the only one who will be on stage. All 3 speakers are in other parts of the world, including Europe, Pretoria, South Africa, and Washington, D.C. So, given those time differences and the time actually for one of them particularly quite late, I would like to beg of you to save the questions for the end. So please stay with me. I would like to also ask the online participants to stay, and we will continue right away. I want to thank Ram for moderating this session. I want to thank Manoj and Richard online. Thank you so much. And we look forward to continuing our dialogue with you offline. Okay, so thank you very much. May I confirm from the IT room that I have all 3 presenters, the remote presenters online, and if you can please put them up on the screen, I will appreciate it very much. So as you would have seen from the program that we have before us, this is session 5, and it was supposed to run from 4 to 5 p.m. Manila time. This is the session on OECD maps. Methodology for assessing procurement systems, as you know, the EGP framework
particularly of the maps. We will start with a presentation by Nicolas Penagos, followed by Tanvir Hussain, and then by Amika Bilal. Due to time differences, we have switched up or agreed to switch up the order of speakers. Hello, gentlemen, I see you all online. Welcome. I will very, very briefly present them. Many of you already know these representatives from the OECD, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank, but I will be brief nevertheless. So Nicolas Penagos is the head of the MAPS methodology Secretariat house at the OECD in Paris, and before joining the MAP Secretariat, he was head of Latin America at the Open Contracting Partnership, and prior to that, he was acting director and deputy director at Colombia's National Procurement Agency. I want to welcome you, Nicolas. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, I suppose your time. The next presenter will be Tanvir Hussain. Tanvir is currently Senior Procurement Specialist at the World Bank, and he's team leader for the World Bank Western Balkan countries, Romania and Turkey, and he has over 26 years of experience in various challenging procurement environments, both in development organizations and in the private sector. And I will also present here Amilcar Bilal, and he's the Regional Procurement Coordinator for the Southern Africa region from the African Development Bank. He covers 13 countries, and before joining the African Development Bank in 2019, he had worked for over 21 years on the implementation of large, medium, and small-scale CapEx projects for various development partners, the public and the private sector. Currently, he's leading the MAPS assessments for Angola, Mauritius, and Eswatini. So I want to welcome all of our speakers who are online. I welcome you. I will be here alone on the podium and moderating your session while you are online. So thank you very much. And I would like to first give the floor to Nicolas and then followed by Tanvir. Thank you very much. Nicolas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Charlene. Really great to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you also to my fellow speakers, especially Tanvir, who is very early there in DC. So today we want to present what we are doing with the MAPS e-procurement module. We want to first hear, and maybe we can run the presentation in full screen. Thanks. Next slide. So first of all, and if you can share using your mobile phones, if you can connect to that QR and let us know, what do you think is MAPS? Maybe some of you are familiar with what is MAPS. What do you think is MAPS? So let's give 1 minute for people to start including their answers there. Just use your mobile phone's camera to get connected. And just type what you think MAPS is. Maybe you can start showing the results at the organizers.
Okay. Nicolas, we don't have them yet. You might need to go ahead to the next, and then we come back to this one.
Okay. So that was just to get a sense of, but I guess we will see that later, just to get a sense of if people knew what MAPS is. So I'm gonna tell you the answer. So MAPS is the methodology for assessing procurement systems. It was built as a reform tool back in 2003 by the World Bank and the OECD as a way to diagnose the strengths and weaknesses of a procurement system in a way to develop recommendations for reform. It uses objective and comprehensive indicators And there's a quality assurance mechanism that is guaranteed by the MAP Secretariat along with a technical advisory group of partners in order to ensure that all assessments carried out throughout the world have a minimum level of quality that partners can rely in their findings. It is aligned with Sustainable Development Goals, with global best practices, including those used by MDBs, but also others such as the Ancestral Model Law, the European directives, and others. And it is, as such, the recognized tool to assess procurement. Next slide. MAPS is part of an assessment system. So when countries are evaluating their economic and financial systems, they need to report to their constituents. They need to identify opportunities for reform. They need to monitor progress. And for that, there are specific assessments that have been created to that end. So there's some more on the tax and revenue side. There's some more on the public finance side. And there's MAPS, which is the recognized assessment, again, for procurement, and has several links, especially with PIFA, on indicators related to public financial management and to procurement one way and the other. Next slide. So the scope of MAPS is really universal. It is a tool that has been used throughout the world and is being applied with its current version, the one that was revised in 2018, in many countries. More than 50 countries have either started or completed already a MAPS assessment using this new methodology. It can be used at any level of government and regardless of the level of development of the jurisdiction. You'll see here that many countries actually in Asia have already used MAPS or are undergoing assessments. Next slide. MAPS is really built as a multi-stakeholder initiative back since 2003 with the creation, but also during the revision process of the methodology that happened between 2015 and 2018. Many multilateral development banks, countries, and also agencies of countries that are working to improve procurement have been involved with MAPS in what we call the MAPS network. Out of those, we have a steering committee that handles the strategy and steers the initiative that the MAPS Secretariat executes. Next slide. So what we do at the MAPS Secretariat, we advise country teams to plan and manage assessments. We provide for the quality assurance starting at the concept note stage, which is the planning stage of a MAPS, and all the way until completing a MAPS report. We provide for quality assurance and also advice to country teams. Next slide. So this is very briefly what is the roadmaps of MAPS, starting with planning. You will hear those countries that have already undergone a MAPS, the term concept note, which is at the start of the process. Then it goes through an analysis of country context, conducting the assessment, validation of findings within country partners and receiving their feedback. Afterwards, receiving feedback from the MAPS Secretariat and the assessment technical advisory group. And finally, completing that with publication and dissemination of assessments that have been certified by the MAPS Secretariat and that obtain the MAPS seal of approval. After that, with partners and countries, of course, the idea is that with MAPS published, they can implement reforms that are recommended in the assessment. And then there's a follow-up done with partners about the execution of these recommendations. Next slide. So MAPS, when we said it's a methodology, so think that methodology is comprised of 4 pillars. There are in each pillar indicators, sub-indicators, and then specific criteria that assessors can use to analyze procurement and the different dimensions of procurement. And this was built as a holistic exercise so that all of the different topics related to procurement were covered. It's a really deep assessment of how procurement is working, and the indicators are aspirational in the way that It's something that countries should strive to get to, and not just a bare minimum of what they should have. Pillar number 1 deals with legal, regulatory, and policy framework. So all the hierarchy of laws, decrees regulating procurement, including international commitments through agreements that the country may have signed. Pillar number 2 deals with institutions, those buying, those regulating, and those even when a country has a central purchasing body, that's also included there. The management capacity of buyers, and whether they receive training, whether they receive advice through guidance, through help desk, etc. And also how this is linked or included in the public financial management system of the country. Pillar number 3 about procurement operations. So in practice, seeing what happens with real procurements, whether those best practices are achieved and are implemented, and also how does the private sector get involved with selling goods and services to the government. And finally, on the pillar number 4, accountability, integrity, and transparency. So this is about the anti-corruption framework of the country, the role of civil society to improve procurement, and also the role of audit institutions, both internal and external audit, and how they interact with procurement. Next slide. So now turning, and this was just an introduction for those of you who might have not have heard of MAPS before. Now let's turn into what is and how e-procurement is dealt with in the MAPS methodology. So even from the core MAPS framework, and this was something that was included in the revision of the methodology in 2018, e-procurement is really one of the core elements that needs to be studied. And when countries undertake a core MAPS assessment, they already have an overview. First of all, in Pillar 1, which we were speaking about, those laws and regulations, so how e-procurement is dealt in that legal framework, but also in Pillar 2 about institutions, and also there's an indicator related specifically to e-procurement, which is indicator 7, how e-procurement in general works, and how the procurement system is supported by IT, whether it is used, and whether there are strategies in place to manage procurement data. Next slide. In any case, when MAPS was revised, the partners saw the need to have some supplementary modules that could be applied if countries wanted to deepen their understanding of specific topics. So some of those are, for example, sustainable public procurement, professionalization. In general, these modules must be done either after having completed a core MAPS or in conjunction with a core MAPS assessment. Except for professionalization, this is the case for all of the other modules. They must be done after or in conjunction with a core MAPS. And let's now see what has been proposed for the e-procurement module. Next slide. So this is just key characteristics for you to take away today about the e-procurement module. So the first one is that this is the result of a joint work by several banks and organizations, the EBRD, who started this work, and then also the World Bank, the OECD, and the European Commission, who worked alongside the MAP Secretariat to complete this methodology for the procurement module that is starting to get used around the world. It follows the pillar structure of the core MAPS framework. So what I just explained about the 4 pillars, this is the same structure that you will see in the e-procurement module. It has 13 indicators and 32 sub-indicators. And this is very important, it is to be used in jurisdictions where there is already some level of implementation of e-procurement. So if a country is just maybe drafting the strategy for e-procurement, the timing would be best to wait until there's some implementation of e-procurement to apply the module and see whether this is working, which are the strengths, which are the weaknesses of that implementation. Again, to be used in conjunction with or after a core MAPS assessment. And A final version of the module will be published after the piloting phase. We will hear just after my presentation about 2 pilots that are currently running. This is usual for MAPS modules to be first piloted so that terms can be fine-tuned just before releasing the publishable version for any country. Next slide. So I don't know if this is working, but this was just to get a sense, and maybe you can log in and try this. How many procurement platforms are currently deployed in your home country? And this is just because when this was one of the key questions that we faced when developing this module. The different implementations that different countries use. So some countries might have, and I don't know if we can see the results, but if not, I will just mention that some countries have maybe don't have yet an e-procurement platform. Some others have one e-procurement platform for everything that they use and for all the procurement in the country. And others might have several e-procurement platforms. So maybe we can go to the next slide. So let's see how this works. And if you see those small dots there, let's think that countries might have different IT solutions and platforms for different, let's say, stages of the procurement cycle. So some countries might have, for example, one platform for the planning stage, or one platform for dealing with invoices, or one platform dealing with the selection process, but others dealing with other parts. So again, some countries might go for just one, some countries might go for several. For procurement methods, also some countries might say tenders go through one and auctions go through another. Entities are and levels of government, and it's put there in italics because in general, and this is common to all maps, to all the map suite, you would first want to identify the object of study, whether it's the federal or the national system, or if it includes subnationals. And then after that, identifying whether within that framework of study, you have several platforms or not. I know of some countries, for example, that might have several platforms depending on the different levels of government or on different entities. So maybe the institutions that deal with health procurement or with infrastructure procurement have other tools, other platforms that they use for procurement. And also there might be other characteristics, namely how several countries use, for example, for their suppliers to bid, there might be a decentralization in terms of having the suppliers log into different platforms depending on their uses and on the features that they need. And afterwards, the information is centrally recorded so as to be analyzed. So again, this is just to mention that different countries might go different paths. And this was one of the challenges that we faced when addressing this e-procurement module, because we wanted this to be universal and to be used in any jurisdiction. Next slide. So how we dealt with this is that we have mentioned that we mentioned in the module the term e-procurement ecosystem. So the procurement module, the MAPS e-procurement module, does not analyze specific IT solutions or platforms. It analyzes the whole e-procurement system, ecosystem, meaning that if there are several platforms, the idea is to identify the standards in place for all of them to operate in a way that fosters e-procurement and that enables stakeholders to use those tools efficiently. Very importantly, it is not a technical assessment of the platforms, but of course, examples should be drawn from how they are working. Next slide. I'm going to go briefly so that we can hear about the experiences in the countries, about how this was built. So again, there are 4 pillars. One, dealing with the legal and regulatory framework, again, drawing from what has already been analyzed in the core maps in the legal part, dealing with the procurement, and going deeper into understanding better how those laws work, and whether there are strategies in place that are aligned with broader government policies, for example, for digitalization of government. Next slide. In pillar number 2, there's the analysis of the procurement ecosystem and whether it has an operational governance and management structure that is working well. Also, whether it relies on an adequate business model and whether it has a strong capacity to develop and improve. Next. Pillar number 3 is devoted to how the e-procurement ecosystem enable the achievement of the country's objectives in procurement. Also, the technical characteristics that render it effective and secure. Again, speaking about the ecosystem in general. So if there are several platforms, how that works for the whole ecosystem. Whether it takes advantage of additional technical and functional features available for a variety of procurement methods. Also, how the data is used and if it facilitates decision-making. And finally, a view of how the private sector is using and is engaged with the procurement ecosystem. Next. And finally, pillar 4, there's an analysis of civil society's engagement with the procurement ecosystem. The procurement ecosystem, if it enables effective treatment of risks, control, and audit. And finally, the topic of e-complaints or whether the e-procurement ecosystem facilitates the review of complaints and appeals. Next slide. So just to give a snapshot of how it works, indicator 9, for example, if you go into one of those indicators, there's 2 sub-indicators. There's one dealing with open data, and there's one dealing with data access and presentation. Next slide. And if you go into one of those, for example, 9A on open data, there are some specific criteria that are more the type of questions that assessors would use to identify whether these are met or not, and to conclude whether the country has already achieved that indicator or met the indicator, and if not, identify what is missing and what would be recommended for that specific country in order to bridge that gap. So this sub-indicator deals with the data stored in the procurement ecosystem and how it is disclosed in machine-readable open data that is ready for anyone to download and use for free. Also, if it is published in a timely manner and provides an accurate information with enough coverage, so not only part of the e-procurement part of the procurement system, but all of it. The idea is for persons to be able to see all of it. Whether open data is being used by stakeholders for analysis, and also what is the country's take on building capacities so that stakeholders can really use the data and analyze it, with some particular quantitative indicators for those. Next slide. So I leave you here the contact details of the MAPS Secretariat and the initiative. Feel free to join us and join the conversation on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And we will begin to deploy this, and we will hear from the countries here about how the pilots are working, but any country could start now using the MAPS e-procurement module, whether after or in conjunction with a core MAPS assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you for such an informative presentation. Thank you for starting with the basis for the MAPS EGP segment, which is the main MAPS assessment, the main MAPS tool, which, as you mentioned, is the universal tool, pretty much the gold standard for assessing procurement systems. So I want to thank you for highlighting this for us. I do want to ask you, you know, even as we encourage all member countries present here to seek to have both the MAPS assessment as well as the EGP aspect of it. I do want to urge them to find the guide online, and I wanted to ask you to tell us whether that template, for the questionnaire is available online. Where can they find it? Where should they look for more information? Because, of course, as you know, actually conducting the MAPS assessment or the EGP part of the MAPS assessment is a very long process that is also interlinked with a higher government level decision to go ahead and conduct a MAPS assessment. So I would like participants here to know more of how they can find on their own information on the MAPS tool and on the EGP module. So do you mind just 1 minute before we go to the next presentation,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
Sure. So on our website, mapsinitiative.org, you will find all the methodology, all the questions related to the MAPS methodology. Related to the supplementary modules, we have already published Sustainable Public Procurement and Professionalization, which are the ones that have already been piloted and finalized. We will publish very soon the MAPS e-procurement module, as well as other modules that are being piloted. But I just wanted to mention that these, and particularly the e-procurement module, might be, there might be some slight changes, especially in terms and in the questions, with the feedback that we received from the pilot. That's been the case for the previous module. So just kind of take that with a pinch of salt when you in the future weeks, when you are able to download that methodology of the procurement module, that it might have some changes afterwards once we complete the 2 pilots.
Okay, thank you very much. So before I hand over to Tanvir, I'm just also flagging the IT room that we are going to Tanvir Hussain, not to Amilcar, as the next speaker. But I do want to reiterate how important of an assessment that the MAPS assessment is. As I mentioned, pretty much the gold standard. You would have seen from Nicholas's presentation that it's used by all the MDBs and many bilateral development partners. So it is an assessment that sets the baseline and establishes the baseline per country, but it also, in the assessment itself, speaks to the goals that a country should have, should want to achieve in terms of its procurement systems in the areas of the 4 pillars that Nicolas spoke to. So it's an assessment tool that I know all the MDBs are interested in, and they use them. Some MDBs actually use the MAPS tool to assess procurement systems for use in bank finance operations. So it is a tool to be taken very seriously, and it is one that ADB also supports, and we work actively in the MAP Secretariat group, reviewing the assessments in collaboration with Nicolas' office and many other MDBs. So we invite you all to consider it, to look into it, to go to the website, as Nicolas mentioned, and to get the information. Okay, Tanvir, I would like to hand over to you now. Please go ahead and take the floor. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. The room can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you, Sherilyn. Let me start the presentation of country case study. We have just started this assessment. This is the country assessment for Montenegro. Montenegro is a country in Europe. It's one of the Western Balkan countries, a small country. So it has just started e-procurement in 2021. And as Nicola mentioned, that it is good to, when there is some sort of implementation is already there, that's a good time to start the MAPS assessment with the e-procurement supplementary module. So I am the DAX team leader for this assessment, and let me give you a snapshot how we actually engage ourselves for preparation of this MAPS assessment. This is a demand-driven assessment, meaning the request came from the Montenegro government. Initially, they got a fund from European Commission for the procurement reform, including the design and implementation of the e-procurement. So as I mentioned earlier, this e-procurement system went live in January 2021 for the whole country, not like a segment basis. So it is already like 2 years data there, and it's a good time to study their system. And the Montenegro Public Procurement Policy Unit considered that maybe their system is not fully robust enough, and it's a good time to have a full assessment, not only the e-procurement system, but also the overall procurement system. And they requested the World Bank whether we could help them to do so. And from there, this dialogue came, and we started this assessment. Next, this is very important to know that the donor coordination or development partners coordination. Most of the cases, the assessment actually done by 1 or 2 development partners, and other could review. But here we took a different approach. It's a small country, so we assessed who actually are active in the country and whether they all could participate in this assessment. So based on our assessment, we found that World Bank, European Commission, EBRD, EIP, and Council of Europe are very active in Montenegro, and we agreed among us that we'll do a joint assessment for this MAPS plus e-procurement module. Then we decided who is responsible for what and how the contribution comes from each of the development partners or the assessment partner. The most important one is the timeline. It is 5 members and very difficult to have everyone's time, particularly the physical missions and other. So we agreed the timeline in connection with everyone. Also, it is to be noted that we have it time limitations. This assessment should be completed in June 30, 2023. So we have to have a very clear timeline, and also all the development partners' commitment to do so, particularly the mission. For example, the main assessment missions we planned for late January, and everyone agreed to that. Similarly, all our future activities have been agreed among ourselves. One of the important feature is that what is the sustainability of this MAPS assessment? In many of the cases, we did MAPS assessment, and then the implementation actually didn't happen because of lack of commitment, maybe fund not available and other. So here we discussed that. And as I said, the European Commission is very active here, particularly in the procurement reform, and they provide a lot of funds. So we discussed with them, and they said that the further implementation of e-procurement based on the MAPS assessment is one of their priority agenda. So whatever the assessment recommendation will come, European Commission is willing to fund that for the further procurement reform. And most importantly, European Commission is one of the assessment partner. So it will be more or less assured that Montenegro government will have adequate fund to implement the recommendation of MAPS, particularly on the recommendation for e-procurement module. Next important point is the key technical expert. So now MAPS score assessment has been done in many countries and other, so we more or less know who could be the expert. But for e-procurement supplementary module, could be a little bit tricky. So we did a very good brainstorm that what is the key procurement expert for the e-procurement supplementary module. So it will be actually the mixed between the core MAPS expert and the EGP supplementary module expert. Some of the core maps expert will also work here. So in the core maps assessment, we consider the following expert. One is a procurement lawyer, then the procurement reform expert, international maps consultant, local maps consultant, financial management expert, governance expert, and economist. So here we actually hiring 2 consultants and remaining all the experts from our own resources, meaning the World Bank is leading this assessment, and we have all this expert from our organization. So then for the e-procurement supplementary module, we consider there should be 2 experts for on EGP itself. The EGP international expert both in the public procurement reform and actual EGP design and implementation expertise. Why it is important? You need to know the real life EGP design and implementation, as well as you have to have a good understanding of the core public procurement reform, because it's very much interlinked. As Nicholas mentioned, that the e-procurement module is based on the core maps assessment 4 module. So it is very important to know the public procurement core principles to assess. So I am in addition to my TTL function, I also lead this part, the first key expert function. Then we have the e-procurement international expert, both technical expertise and actual EGP design and implementation. So here we need a real technical expert on in this field, and also he must be knowledgeable to design and implementation of EGP in different countries. So here it is very difficult to get this type of people in bank. We have few consultants on that, and we hired one, Rajesh Sekka, who is helping us in many countries in design and implementation of e-procurement. Next, coming to the data analyst expert. So we are thinking that to pull out all the data from the e-procurement and do an analysis of that. So for that, a data analytical expert is required, and the data research associate will help the data analyst expert. Then one of the important tasks before you start your assessment, the pre-assessment mission. Why it is important? During this pre-assessment mission, we conducted is in early November, and some of the development partners also participated to that. So during that, to understand the key stakeholders, who are the stakeholders for that, and what is their perception of this e-procurement systems and further assessment. An overall understanding of current e-procurement system. So then you can think about your resources and other set of things. Availability of data from the e-procurement system. What type of data are available in the system? Possibility of data dump to do a comprehensive data analysis. So we actually discussed with them, and they agreed to provide all the data to us that's called data dump, and that is very good to analyze not only the e-procurement system, also as a country as a whole, how the procurement is actually functioning. To form an effective steering committee, so from offline, it's very difficult who are the key stakeholders and who could be good to participate as a steering committee. So we discussed with them, meet with them, and finalize the steering committee. Agreed on a detailed time-bound action plan. As I mentioned, that time is limited, meaning by June 30, 2023, we need to complete that one. So we need a very strong commitment from our counterpart. And we agreed a very detailed timeline with them when different assessment will conduct, when we need the data, who are the focal points, and other. And finally, we set the focal point for all the key stakeholders. So from the offline, we know who are the who are the person we need to contact for each of the stakeholders. For example, state audit, who are the stakeholders? We need some data or information, directly can contact that one. And we also have a local e.g. Expert who can coordinate with them and get the data or whatever information is required. So that is more or less the synopsis of the pre-work before the assessment. So we already developed the concept note and already reviewed by the map secretariat, and there are some comments. So we are expecting that in mid-December, the concept note will be approved, and then we'll start the detailed assessment from there, and the first official mission will start in late January 2023. So that's it from my side, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Tanvir, for taking the time to share with us the requirements, the processes, the steps that you and the team have taken as you prepare for the this pilot, really, of the e-procurement supplementary module in Montenegro. I want to thank you so much for your time, and I want to thank you for this time, at this time of the morning where you are in Washington, D.C. In fact, you don't look like it's 4 a.m. So thank you so much for joining us and presenting with the spirit that you have. I'd like to move on swiftly to invite Amika Bilal from the African Development Bank. Amika, I want to apologize for having switched you out from being the second speaker to being the third, but we welcome you nevertheless. We're very pleased to hear about your experience with the Mauritius e-procurement supplementary modules. So you have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know what time it is for you in Pretoria. Can you tell me?
11 a.m.
11 a.m. Okay, very good.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, you have the floor. It's all yours. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon for you. Good morning for other colleagues. Yes, we will be just sharing the experience on the MAPS supplementary module. Mauritius has been also chosen as Montenegro to pilot this e-procurement supplementary module. But the difference is that Mauritius already completed the core assessment. So we'll also be sharing some of the preliminary findings of the core assessment with regards to the e-procurement. Next slide, please. Mauritius is a small African island located around 2,600 kilometers from the east coast of Africa. With regards to the Mauritius journey of e-procurement started in 2014 with the development of the software, and it was launched in 2015, accompanied by the regulations, amendments to the regulations to start using the e-procurement, and such regulations have been further amended in 2016, 2018, and 2022. So during the peak of the COVID, the government enacted a directive to make a mandatory to make e-procurement mandatory from 1st of January 2021. And at that time, we are already doing the MAPS core assessment. Just to highlight in terms of the ownership and ownership of the government with regards to the procurement, the initial request to do the assessment was specifically to do the assessment of the procurement system. Through the dialogue and engagement, we agreed that it would be better to do the core assessment first, and then we could narrow down to the e-procurement after the core assessment has been completed. At that time, also the pilot of the procurement system was not ready. So we already started with the startup activities for the e-procurement assessment. So next slide, please. But I would like to next slide, please. To first also discuss the team arrangements. Besides the internal, the core assessment, both the core assessment and the procurement assessment are led by the African Development Bank with support of the World Bank. So both African Development Bank and the World Bank provided internal staffing to support the arrangement, same as the case of Montenegro, procurement specialist, financial management specialist, economists, so on and so forth. And also the World Bank provided an in-house e-procurement expert during the core assessment. So in terms of e-procurement, the e-procurement expert that was also involved in the core assessment is leading the e-procurement assessment, and the procurement specialist, the lead consultant during the core assessment, is also part of the team, providing support as a procurement consultant. We kept the same procurement lawyer from the between the core assessment and the e-procurement assessment. All other arrangements are more or less the same. The steering committee is exactly the same. So it is just to show all of you what are the main differences and similarities in terms of arrangements between the core assessment and the e-procurement assessment. Next slide, please. So following the core assessment, there were some findings with regards to procurement, to the e-procurement system, and we have divided these assessments, the main findings, according to the pillars of the maps. On pillar number 1, the main findings, although you have seen in the previous slide, there were a lot of amendments to the procurement regulations to accommodate e-procurement. Still, the application of the e-procurement system is not fully harmonized with existing act and regulations. The Public Procurement Act in Mauritius dates from 2006, and when in 2014 the e-procurement system was introduced, it was just changing whatever was there under the paper-based procurement. It was to convert into the e-procurement system. So there was no proper business engineering done at the stage. It was more on the compliance side. If whatever was there on the paper-based system, it was transferred to the e-procurement systems. So it's not the advantages of the e-procurement system were not fully capitalized. Also, the issues related to sustainable public procurement are not fully embedded into the current procurement legal framework and the e-procurement ecosystem. Next slide, please. So with regards to pillar number 2, there is a lack of integration of the e-procurement system with other systems like the banking system, the tax authority, the inventory management, so on and so forth. So that is the current situation of the procurement system based on the core assessment findings. And also there are some modules that are that have been developed, but they are not being utilized. For instance, the challenge and appeal mechanism is done offline. The reversal auction is not used. The contract monitoring is not also used, and also the procurement request module. And lastly, under this pillar number 2, open contracting data is not supported by the current EPS system. Next slide, please. Concerning pillars number 3 and 4, the main findings of the core assessment are related to the bidding stage that is not currently applied. The system could have these functionalities, but is not being used. Also, the evaluations are done offline. So the evaluation committee, they download the bids, and then they do the evaluation offline, and then the results of the evaluation are uploaded again in the system. Through the MAP score assessment, we had a survey to the private sector, and one of the issues that was raised were technical glitches on the system, on the e-procurement system. So this was repeatedly raised by the private sector or during this survey of the core assessment. With regards to the last pillar, pillar number 5, as we said, the complaint module is available, but is not being used. The independent review mechanism, independent review panel, they do the review offline, completely offline. Okay, so those are basically the main findings based on the core assessment, and it shows the one that the initial request from the government is justified in terms of the assessment of the e-procurement module, but also the recommendations from the core assessment also point to a deep dive on the assessment of the e-procurement system, and that's what we will be doing, piloting the e-procurement system, same as the Montenegro is doing. So the last slide, please. In terms of steps for the procurement system, we already submitted the draft concept note to the MAP Secretariat, and also some startup activities like analyzing the contracts for the consultants, and also the drafting of the as is report should be hopefully completed by the end of December, end of this year. In January, between January and February, we'll be also doing recommendations on the functional specifications of the existing e-procurement system, and also drafting the report of the e-procurement system supplementary module. This report will be subject to the quality assurance that Nicholas referred in his presentations. First, internal quality assurance from the African Development Bank and World Bank through peer reviewers, and then also through the MAP Secretariat and ATPPEN. We expect to complete this assessment by June 2023. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for this presentation. We are at the end of today's session, but before I close up and perhaps hand over to Galia, I do want to go over a few points that struck me as important in terms of what was presented by the three speakers in this session. First, I want to highlight for your taking home, for your noting, for your memory. As Nicola mentioned, the MAPS assessment usually includes a strategic plan of action. The strategic plan of action is very important because what it does is it identifies gaps, areas of opportunity, areas where you can strengthen your system. And usually this plan of action, depending on the depth of the work that has to be done, comes, with support identified by the various development partners who would have partnered with your countries on developing on undertaking the maps and, of course, putting together the strategic plan of action. So that is the first point I want you to note, that there is a strategic plan of action at the end of the maps process. From the main points raised by Tanvir, I want to remind you that it is a demand-driven process. The maps assessments, we usually like to say, are country-owned. So they're owned by you, they're driven by you. You should ask for it, partner with your MDB, and we can fund the undertaking of the assessments, and sometimes we do it jointly with the World Bank, with EBRD, it depends. Sometimes there are 3 MDBs partnering with one country on one assessment, so keep that in mind. There was a comment on sustainability and implementation, you know, and also this came from Tanvir's presentation as he spoke to what they are considering, or all the things they're taking into account in the case of the Montenegro assessments. The strategic plan of action is the outcome, a major outcome document beyond, of course, just the findings, where you agreed, where you were not, etc. Don't waste that opportunity to implement some of those changes identified or areas of strengthening. The key experts, choose your experts well. You need core experts for the main maps, and you need specific experts to be engaged for the e-procurement module. So kindly focus on that and do conduct or request the pre-assessment mission to be conducted. With respect to Amikar's presentation, some of the key highlights I would like to leave us with was the comment he made that it was after COVID that there was a mandate by the government of Mauritius that, you know, procurement needs to be e-procurement after COVID. And I just wanted to remind us all of, you know, pandemics or other natural disasters or other events can happen. And so, yes, COVID taught us a great lesson, but let us not lose the momentum. You know, we should continue to emphasize the importance of e-procurement. And for those countries who've not made it a priority, let's try to see what we can do. I also want to highlight from 3 of the points made on three pillars, pillars 2, 3, and 4 mentioned by Amikar. He spoke to the findings of the assessment, because as he mentioned, the Mauritius assessment is pretty much almost done. They discovered that procurement in the EGP system they had was not end-to-end. You saw that also in the presentation that I gave earlier on some of the ADB developing member countries. We have e-procurement systems, but they're not end-to-end. And the full potential of the EGP system is not in use. This is also an observation that we have here in Asia. And as I showed you the timeline, you would have seen that some of our developing member countries developed their platforms in 2020 and still are, not 2020, in the year 2000, sorry, and still are at only the e-publication stage. So this is also, you know, important to us, to ADB, and here in Asia and the Pacific, not just in the African case mentioned. We need to bring our EGP systems currently in use. We need to maximize the potential of those. Of course, from pillar 3, the point that I wanted to raise was the comment Amikar made on limited innovation for procurement methods. So these are all areas, I think all of us actually have challenges in those areas to varying degrees, and I think we need to keep those in mind. We have shared experiences, we have shared challenges, and we can share information and help each other. Now, before I close, there are 48 ADB developing member countries. And as far as MAPS assessments done on the new 2015 MAPS model, Nicola, you can help me. I know the reform started in 2015, and I believe it finished in 2016 or 2017. Anyway, the MAPS 2 is the tool we're now using. And out of the 48 ADB DMCs, we have only 7 MAPS assessment done. Okay, Bangladesh and India were World Bank led, and ADB we peer reviewed, and ADB partnered with the World Bank and others on the Philippines assessments, Bhutan, which is ongoing, Indonesia, Timor, and Vietnam. So, having said that, what I want to highlight is how much opportunity we have to undertake MAPS assessments. If you do the math, There's a lot of opportunity ahead. There's a lot of work ahead, not just for the main MAPS assessment, but for you as advocates of EGP to push and request the EGP supplementary module. Because the assessment, the MAPS assessments can be done without that module. It's not always mandatory and it's not always included. So what I would do is urge you to, I mean, obviously I know you are here EGP experts, but I'm sure that you liaise with your procurement, your national procurement agency. Talk to them about what's happening with the maps. If ever, they go to undertake the maps, and ask, let's advocate. What about the e-procurement module? What about the e-procurement supplementary module? And let's get that in there, because 7 out of 48 is a lot to go. And so we have a lot of, all I see is opportunity for maps assessments and for maps e-procurement modules. With that, with these comments, I would like to end this current session, which is today's final session. I would like to ask and invite Galia, if there are any, a quick question, yes. Thank you.
Having said this, while the World Bank themselves says the 10% money has been saved, and the assessment of the GEM system has been done by the World Bank almost 2 years back, they have decided not to use GEM as a country EGP system. So I'm not sure. At the one time, bank want to confirm 10% money saved on the GEM. At the same time, they do not want to use this. So whether they don't like the country to save 10% of the money. Again, I'm not looking for a quick answer, but these are the two quick things which really put a lot of the concern, which doesn't give the enough confidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those two questions coming from India. Nicola, are you still online? Did you hear that question to you? I'm not sure if you're able to answer at this point, but it relates to the publication of the MAPS assessment that was done on India. And particularly publication. We know that a summary was published online by the World Bank, and there was 7 months ago also the MAP Secretariat published the summary. If I'm
MAP Secretariat is yet to publish anything in the last 3 years.
Okay.
Only the World Bank published the summary in May 2022. Assessment completed in March 2020. It's around 3 years back.
Okay. Nicola, I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's completely fine, and that allows me to explain a bit how we are working with what we call the backlog of assessments. So, just to explain, as you saw, there was a revision of the methodology published on 2018, and then the MAP Secretariat started in 2021. So, assessments that were carried out in between those 2 years, 2018 up to 2021, including the MAPS assessment for India. Partners that sit in our steering committee decided to have the full quality assurance process for that also done. So, of course, we have reviewed the assessment. We are not asking countries for any of the backlog of assessments to reassess any part of that, because we know that that's kind of, let's say, a picture taken at a certain point in time. But what we want just is for some things, sometimes in some assessments to be maybe reorganized, some things that were in one indicator should go in another, just so that the report is fully compliant with the methodology, and that we've done with all assessments. So some of the assessments we are still working with partners to see how those will get published. Maybe there's again some tweaking. Of course, I will not go into the full detail of what is going with the assessment of India that we are discussing with the World Bank, but we expect it to be finalized so that it gets the MAP seal of approval very soon.
Thank you very much, Nicola. And I'm not sure if Tanvir is able to make any comment on the second question. Tanvir, are you still online? Maybe he fell asleep. Okay, but I will say though, your question is noted, and I'm sure we can answer offline afterwards in terms of what has happened with the assessment for GEMS. Okay, so Galia, please, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Charlene. I think you have done a wonderful job being here all by yourself with three gentlemen being there virtually. You know, that wasn't a small feat. And last session of the day, thank you very much. Okay, some logistical arrangements. Please do submit your boarding passes to Apple. Our controllers department still believes some people are not using airplanes, so they still require you to submit the boarding pass as evidence of travel. So please do submit them to Apple. And we will have a small networking function just outside this door. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you. 8:30, but yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you very much.